Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Friday, May 2nd, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about Larry Sabato's crystal ball. The Center for Politics at the University of Virginia released yesterday their 2026 gubernatorial map ratings. Now, this is one of the most reputable sources for election ratings and just generally speaking election analytics, and I'm always excited to see when they release their comprehensive reports free to the public that discusses what they see in battleground states and battleground districts, and in this case, specifically gubernatorial states, gubernatorial races rather, that have extreme importance as we go into the next ending of this second Trump administration. And I say that because the governor's races that are spotlighted in 2025 and 2026 are the same governor races that I was covering when I first started this channel in the June of 2017. Under similar circumstances, Donald Trump was president. There was all this anticipation around the Democratic Party. And I looked no further than Larry Sabato's crystal ball and other sources like Inside Elections and the Cook Political Report for a general understanding of political analysis. Now, we're a lot different today than we were in 2017 covering the Trump administration. This channel will turn 8 years in roughly just about a month. You know, we're talking a month and a week, less than that really. And so it is interesting to see the same exact states up. And I just honestly, am in a bit of a emo state, if that's the right word for it. I don't like to use that word because I don't want to come across a certain way. But, this feels very conclusive. This is 2 days ago, I finished my final class ever for undergraduate education, completing my degree in government, and so it has been quite a wild ride going from starting this channel before I started high school and now continuing it on it today, finishing my time in college, and it's been quite interesting. So when I saw that the ratings were released, I thought, what better than to do this sort of full circle analysis on the same state, same races with the same people. And so I thought it'd be quite interesting to watch, as well as the data that they provide us actually might provide a bit of insight as to what the expectations are given the certain slate of candidates that have already announced or who might announce in the future. And so they do a very comprehensive analysis here. What I'm more focused on is the map. They do a lot of explanation about what they might see in different circumstances, what could happen depending on who enters or leaves the race, or what type of coalitions get built around independent candidates. So all of that is certainly up in the air. But what I'm focused on, again, is this individual map. The ratings from Larry Sabato that show the Republicans at 19 favored seats and the Democrats at 15. Now, the map we're working with right now currently has Democrats in the advantage compared to this one. Although it is a tied map, Democrats are actually in one of their best stances when it comes down to governor elections in recent memory. Ever since Donald Trump has been president, Democrats have been combating a lot of different things, namely elections in solid and leaning Democratic states that Republicans just simply have gotten the upper hand by luck of the draw, namely states like Florida back in 2018 that despite a national circumstance that would have lent itself to a Democratic victory, Democrats fell short, and now Ron DeSantis stands to be one of the most well-known names in the modern-day GOP. And it's races like those that alarm Democrats and also make them realize just how important these gubernatorial races are. Accomplishing in a race now might prevent a future Republican president later down the line, as well as maintain a dominating Democratic presence that can push against an administration that stands to benefit from the degradation of the Democratic Party, with Republicans controlling the House, Senate, and the White House. And so looking at the ratings here, you might find some surprises and ones that aren't as surprising. But I think it all deserves a comprehensive analysis because that is exactly what they gave us. And it also shows that there is things that we can sort of understand that explain, despite Democrats having a close and competitive race in this state in the last election, here's why the race might be lopsided towards the Republicans and vice versa. Now, there's a huge anticipation on the Democratic Party to have a wave type of election. And so what I actually decided to do was that I'm going to compare the 2026 ratings with that of the 2018 ratings, the final ratings that Larry Sabato and his organization put forth on November 5th, 2018. Shout out to the Wayback Machine. It's a great source to find old internet articles because unfortunately the website wouldn't load the images. I don't know if it's just me, but it actually shows me exactly what this website showed on November 7th, 2018. And the map here actually looks a lot different than the one that they released today. Republicans have seemingly gotten into a better position, but also Democrats were behind way more in 2017. They didn't hold Wisconsin. They didn't have Michigan. They didn't have Ohio or Iowa or Maine or Kansas or New Mexico or Nevada or Florida, and Democrats won the majority of these open races. All of the ones with dashed lines that are blue suggested a Democratic pickup, meaning Republicans currently held it at that time. And so Democrats have certainly taken states like New Mexico, for instance, and Illinois and Wisconsin, which had Republican incumbents that Democrats defeated, or in some cases won open races in 2018, where you will find that this time around, Democrats are slated to do quite well. But the map here isn't as conducive, and it's not as blue as the old map was. Even though Republicans did end up winning Iowa, Ohio, and Florida, the rest of the states did, in fact, fall in line and vote for the Democratic Party. And that's a huge difference from what the expectations are today. And that sort of explains that 2018 and 2026 are actually way more different than you might expect. Although there is a very national pushback against Donald Trump, his approval rating is starting to fall to the levels at which it was in the first administration, and the rate at which the decline is happening is noteworthy in and of itself. But the 2018 generic ballot was far more lopsided in favor of a Democratic victory than it is today. By the time we reached Election Day, Democrats led the national generic ballot by a margin of 7.3%, all for them to win in November 2018 by 8.4%. I think that matters. I think that makes a difference, because looking at where we are today, the Democrats lead by, in comparison, a measly 2.3%. And that isn't to say that the numbers aren't going to get better. We're seeing an uphill climb here, right? A few weeks ago, we saw the Quantus Insights poll show Republicans had a 1-point advantage, that NBC was saying Democrats had a 1-point advantage. But since then, the polls have consistently gotten better. Democrats +2 with CNBC, Democrats +7 with Fox News, +3 with New York Times and Siena College, +5 with News Nation and DDHQ. The numbers are getting better, but they're not at the level they were in 2018, and Trump's approval rating isn't as bad as it was in 2018, which can explain why the governor's ratings aren't as in favor. But I spent a lot of time talking about the national standpoint. What you are focused on and why you watched this video, I assume, was to look at the more individual statewide basis, and that's what we're going to do now. On your screen, you will find the Republicans are expected to win quite handedly in a number of traditionally Republican states: Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama, and South Carolina. But two additions that we certainly did not see as safe Republican back in 2018 come from Texas and Florida, which in 2018, Texas did hold that designation. But Florida actually was a lean Democratic state. Ended up going to Ron DeSantis by a margin of less than half a percentage point, but the point still stands. The map today shows that Florida is overwhelmingly more conservative. And Iowa and Ohio, too, as two states that the Democratic Party was expected to pick up in 2018, now likely for the Republican column. But Democrats have their own fair share of safe states. Maryland, which had a Republican governor back in 2018, the rating back then was likely GOP, today safe blue. Massachusetts was safe red in 2018, today safe blue, and New York and Rhode Island are now states that are Democrats expected to do quite well. Rhode Island was always in that likely column, but less so because there wasn't more unpopular Democratic incumbent. And New York, which was pretty safe here, still ends up being in the Democratic column despite the massive overperformance for Donald Trump in the state. It just overwhelmingly is way too partisan for Republicans to even have a chance. Pennsylvania, Minnesota, New Mexico all stay in the Democratic column, and Pennsylvania, I think, is certainly noteworthy. But outside of the likely and safe states, it leaves us with a pretty interesting map of battleground states. You have Wisconsin, Michigan, Kansas, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. Interestingly enough, which doesn't get talked about much, but very popular Republican incumbents in New Hampshire and Vermont, expectation is that Republicans run again in Vermont and New Hampshire. They have two-year terms, so they're constantly up for re-election, but these states seem to like their incumbents. Very popular Republicans. 8 years ago, we saw a very similar thing where both of the states were rated as pretty solid for the Republican Party compared to how they voted on the national level. Vermont being one of the most blue states in the nation, having a very popular and strong electorally Republican incumbent. But looking at Nevada and Arizona and Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania and Georgia and Kansas, remove Pennsylvania. I forgot that it was and is a likely blue state. A lot of these states feel familiar. Taking out Kansas, a lot of these states feel like we are competing on the same territory on both sides as was done in the last election. That Nevada is a battleground, that Arizona is a battleground. Kansas really is because there's a popular Democratic incumbent who might, boost up a lieutenant governor or whoever else to run in her place because they are term limited here. But Kansas still leans towards the right as a pickup for the GOP. But Wisconsin stays blue. Michigan and Arizona will be quite interesting. Michigan holds a toss-up designation, not because people are confident that Republicans might do super well, but also, but because there is an independent candidate who was a Democratic mayor of Detroit, very popular, maintains a high level of approval and name ID in a city that Democrats rely on for victory. Running as a third-party candidate, pulling votes away from Democrats and Republicans. We will see. Jocelyn Benson right now is the presumptive front runner, but still a competitive primary at that. The lieutenant governor is also running against her. So Michigan really is in a very uniquely interesting position. There could be a lot of vote splitting. Democrats could end up spoiling their own race. Who knows? But that leaves us to reasonably conclude that Michigan is a toss-up state, despite having a pretty strong history for Gretchen Whitmer, who had won the state twice by double digits in 2018 and 2022. History doesn't seem to like Democrats, though, in this case, because no Democrat has ever been elected after a two-term Democratic incumbent since the 1960s. So it'll be interesting to watch. For the other toss-up state, one of the two on the map here, which honestly is quite baffling in and of itself, but in Arizona, you'll find that Katie Hobbs just simply ran against the right Republican at the right time in 2022. This time she'll have the backing of a more national push in favor of the Democratic Party, but Arizona did vote for Trump by roughly 6 points. So you're already competing when your national candidate at that point, Kamala Harris, was down 6 points. You're really building back up. And so Katie Hobbs against the right Republican would lose, against the right Republican for her would win. It'll be interesting to see, because right now Andy Biggs, who leads the Republican primary polling right now, not endorsed by Trump, that's Karen Taylor Robson, who would fare far better in the general election, very well could lose that race to Katie Hobbs. But so far, Arizona and Michigan still very much within competitive nature, despite having Democratic incumbents. But those Democratic incumbents help in states like Wisconsin, in states like Pennsylvania. They certainly are going to help if Tim Walz decides to run for a third term in Minnesota. The one here that I think will be a big stickler for Democrats is in Nevada, where Joe Lombardo has ended up making himself way more popular than a lot of Democrats would have anticipated. He ran against Steve Sisolak back in 2022, defeated him by roughly a point or a few points. It was a very competitive race. Nevada typically does swing back and forth between Republican and Democratic governors, but typically speaking, these governors, if they're popular, can do well. Sisolak was not one of those governors. And so Lombardo came in, now is a popular governor, and so he ends up with that Republican lean in Georgia as well. Brian Kemp cannot run for re-election, but there aren't any top-tier Democrats who have announced either. Jason Carter and Lucy McBath, who were largely seen as the best recruits for the party and running in Georgia. Democrats have yet to crack Georgia on a statewide level, and so those two were certainly being recruited. Both of them had to drop and said that they would not be running, at least right now, because of their spouse's health. And so Georgia, Nevada, two states that Democrats certainly would love to get, were closer and, in fact, more favorable to Democrats in 2018. But right now, the current environment does not lend itself to making Georgia and Nevada immediate or likely pickups for Democrats. Enough so that the expectation here is more that they vote for Republicans rather than even being closer or voting for the Democratic Party. And so you can start to see, why this map builds out itself as one that favors the GOP. The map here is just fundamentally skewed in a way that, despite Democrats doing well in 2022, it might bring them back to more of a 2018 type of margin, where, yes, they are getting some states where they could win Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania, but they might lose states that they would like to win. Sherrod Brown might run in Ohio. He could lose, right? Rob Sand might run in Iowa. He could lose. Katie Hobbs could run in Arizona as an incumbent Democrat and lose, right? And so Democrats might be getting some pickups elsewhere. But right now, the map is in favor of the GOP and expects them to gain an overall net advantage over the Democrats in comparison to where they are right now. The map is pretty split down the middle. Kansas is blue, Arizona is blue, Michigan is blue, and that brings Democrats and Republicans to a point where they're at near equal. This map would be more favorable to the GOP. Should they win Michigan? Should they win Arizona? Same exact thing. What's an 18-18 map right now might end up being 22-15, or 21-15, rather, or 20-16. an advantage for the GOP that would likely mean that those governors would further go alongside this second Trump administration, boost the agenda of Donald Trump, work with Republican state legislatures, or not, depending who's elected. But it is interesting. And so we finish off this video by looking at the map here and just really recognizing that it is a lot better for Republicans than it was in 2018. But the opportunity still stands for Republicans to lose. Should the right candidate run in Alaska and Ohio and Iowa, as the article suggests, maybe the ratings will change. If Sherrod Brown decides to run for governor, very possible that he wins. If Mary Peltola decides to run for governor in Alaska, very possible that she wins. It's an interesting circumstance, and one that I think the Democrats are certainly going to be trying to field the most high-quality candidates ever. But as of right now, based on who's announced and based on where we are with Trump's approval and national blowback, the margins here favor the GOP slightly, though Democrats would expect and should expect a more favorable national environment, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Democrats are on lock. There's a lot of work that needs to be done between now and November 2026, and it looks like they're just getting started. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2025 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.